This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs the Playbook. I got another David, another King David Steinberg, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of the marketing tech unicorn, Zeta Global. Welcome to the Playbook, David.
Thank you. From one King David to another. It's
That's
great to
right.
be here, David.
I always think David Melech, and we were just talking about how the names have changed over the generations. Now they go to school and it's Dakota M, Dakota J, Dakota,
Exactly. When we were kids, it was David S, David M. You know, there were 3 or 4 Davids to a class.
Well, I'm going to start off with a hunch. And one of the biggest lessons of being an entrepreneur and building a business is voting for what you want. And you and I have so many different similarities. I imagine that you had some sort of family pressure growing up that may not have been aligned with your career objectives. And I thought,
well, as a Jewish David from New York, you can be sure that they didn't want me to be an entrepreneur, right? It's Dr. Steinberg, lawyer. My family never had high enough hopes for me to be a doctor. I wasn't going to excel to that level, so they thought I should be a lawyer.
Right, me too. It's doctor, lawyer, or failure is what my mom said.
Exactly.
And people ask me, go ahead.
I was just going to tell you, one of the funniest stories of my life, David, was we had just taken my last company public. We were sort of at, just south of a couple of billion in market cap. And my grandmother had Alzheimer's, but she was the most loving woman. She was so great. My grandfather and her were together 72 years. I'm sure you and your wife at 23 will catch up in 49 years.
I hope
but
so.
Literally, she went out to dinner with a group. And in that group was the chancellor of a law school that my grandparents at one time had really wanted me to go to. And I didn't get into that school. So I was very dyslexic, very ADD. It was a very competitive school, and he was a friend of my grandfather's. And they were having dinner, and he was a very understanding man. And in the middle of dinner, my grandmother with Alzheimer's looks up and says, "Thank you so much, Lawrence." And she goes back to eating her dinner, like nothing else. And he looked at my grandmother and said, "Well, Sylvia, that's so nice of you to say thank you. What are you thanking me for?" She said, "Thank you for making sure my grandson didn't get into your law school."
I love that.
But that was like 25 years into this whole journey.
That's my favorite part about speaking. Two of the sides of it is one, I love the big bios, right? And then my opening line always, to illustrate radical humility, will go through all the awards and the Lee Steinberg experience and the Warren, like all this big stuff. And then I always start by just saying, just so you know, if my mom was sitting in the front row, she'd be telling you, my other son's a doctor.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. The old joke.
No
and
question.
I was, literally, I went to law school to please my mom. And then the minute I got out, I got an entrepreneurial job selling, in the internet. And she still said the internet was a fad, made me take the bar to mitigate all risk. So I had to be a real lawyer just in case I failed.
By the way, I had unlimited numbers of conversations with family members telling me, "What's your downside? Have the law degree. If this whole thing doesn't work out, you can afford to live. And if it does work, you know how to negotiate." I mean, it was like they were trying to manipulate me any way possible to become a lawyer. I was like, I'm not going.
So where did that come from? Because I really feel, some empathy. There's a lot of different cultures, not just, the nice Jewish Davids out there. There's many cultures that these pressures come. And even worse now, sometimes I don't think the parents have the economic perspective. It's one thing how expensive when we went to school it was. But today it's crippling. And, I'm a huge education person, but I also, as we were discussing how important Zoom is to our businesses now and how much money we can save, there's some extraordinary free education. There's extraordinary college educations and graduate school educations that don't have to cripple you for your entire life with $500,000 of debt.
Here's what I'll tell you. And we're getting sort of into some of this stuff that's more philosophical than
that's good. That's what the playbook's about.
Yeah. What I always say is there's effectively 10 grad schools that if you can get in there, go.
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't those 10, it just doesn't matter. As crazy as that is. If you can get into Harvard Business School, Yale Law School, Stanford Business School, Berkeley graduate degree, like if you can get into those, and it's not just because you're getting the education. To me, it's more about the network you're building.
Agreed.
And the credibility that comes with, I mean, we all know the guys who, when they start talking, oh, I went to school in Boston.
I love that. That's my brother.
Whenever somebody says that to me, I'm always like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Did you go to BU?
Yeah,
just like, and of course, they went to Harvard or but the truth of the matter is, if you can get into one of those schools, I think it pays back in spades. I think if you're talking about a tier, and then you get into the very high quality tier 2, maybe. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, I believe that a graduate degree is without question a waste of 2 or 3 years and a couple $100,000. If you're going to work for a large company and you want to ascend the ranks of that company, having a high quality graduate degree is really important. Now, I'm still of the opinion that college is table stakes. I think it's important. I get that everybody doesn't have to go to college in the same way, meaning some people can go at night, some people can go online, some people, which is what I think you were referring to. But I do think if you can provide for your kids, or they can, or you can get a traditional 4-year degree from a quality school, whether it's liberal arts or business or whatever, I think that's going to benefit you for the rest of your life.
I agree. And I think too, economically looking at the experience of just going to college, if your parents can afford it, I've worked really hard because mine couldn't, and I got a scholarship to go. But I think if you get a scholarship or your parents can afford it, and think about it, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I think the networking side, to go to the biggest schools like USC, and not even the Harvards for undergrad and those for networking. I believe, the Ohio States and the USCs, especially considering what you want to do, that you literally are buying a network if you have that personality, and join the fraternity and get 20 really wealthy brothers that parents will fund your first deal. How much is that worth, right?
Listen, I was one of the lucky ones. I was from an upper middle class background, so my parents, I sort of joke. People always say to me, what do entrepreneurs have in common? And I say, well, aptitude for risk, the ability to go out, the ability to lead people. But in almost all cases, the vast majority of incredibly successful entrepreneurs are from upper middle class backgrounds. And it's not the most politically correct thing to say, but they've got enough money that they sort of come out of school with no debt. They know that sort of food and shelter are taken care of, so they can take that risk with lower opportunity cost of failure, right? Whereas if you're really wealthy, you generally don't take that risk, right? You're sort of comfortable. Or if you're really sort of poor, you have to struggle to put food on the table. I'm not suggesting there aren't some incredible entrepreneurs who don't come from very poor or very wealthy backgrounds, and there are many of them.
Yeah.
But if you look at the middle of the bell curve on the number of entrepreneurs, and if you looked at it, and I have, from sort of how they were brought up, it's that middle class to upper middle class background, which is what I was. I mean, my dad was an accountant, and my stepfather was an entrepreneur, and they put me through school. And I remember graduating and my dad saying, you know what, congratulations, you got no debt, but good luck.
It's so interesting you say that, because I grew up, especially young, really poor, and I always tease my kids. I said, I feel so bad for you, and they're like, why? I go, because you didn't grow up poor. I can't teach you what I've learned. But there is one more common denominator. I love the numbers there. There's one thing that I tell all entrepreneurs, because they'll say, what's the one thing that you look for? And it's the same thing I look for in athletes. And we would, when I was running Lee Steinberg, look at athletes in a different way. And one of those things was the giving back and having the perspective, that they would give back and build a community around there. But there's this spirit of excellence that you must be what you can be. right? And whether you're middle class, upper middle class, poor or rich,
I agree.
the guys who and women that make it, you know, and I was on with the Pinkinator, Cindy and Ollie Lou from Kabam, you know, and you get on it, and everybody's completely different, but they have one thing in common. You know, well, we were about to quit, but that's not me, you know.
Yeah. Well, I joke, and I think we're saying sort of the same thing. I think the other thing that you really see in a lot of entrepreneurs is fear of failure, which is the same thing I see in great athletes, right? It's like, and that fear of failure, as you succeed again and again, becomes confidence, and that confidence drives you to excellence. And you know, listen, you can work harder than anybody else for free. Like literally, like you don't have to pay to learn how to work harder than anyone else. And I get up earlier to this day than almost everybody I work with. I work later to this day than almost everybody I work with. Much to my wife's chagrin, you know, she sort of jokes that she used to get to see me more before I started working from home in this whole lockdown. But, you know,
get to see me through the windows of my closet. So I get the wave now, which is really nice. I really feel like I'm at the NBC studios in Manhattan. People are walking by. Unfortunately, it's the shower into the bathroom.
Well, as long as you don't get them in their towels on camera, I think you'll be fine. But,
yeah, I keep the camera this way with my green screen. One of the things is empowerment. You know, you and I are a little bit more seasoned when it comes to experience, and we've seen.
So David, you're calling us both old, and I barely know
both
you.
old.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, we're both old, but you know, coming with that, we've gone through a lot of generations of employees, and one of the critical business issues is entitlement versus empowerment. But I think that we misdistinguish that with the generations. There's a different type of empowerment that's going on. I really believe I see extraordinary kids. I have a couple that are above your head here on Zoom that, you know, are definitely and grew up with all types of, you know, affluence, but yet they have that desire and empowerment. Where do you see generationally, even from our own kids and our own employees now, the distinctive differences? Is it in empowerment, entitlement, or is it something else?
You know, I come down more on your side of the trade here. And I sit in a lot of meetings where, you know, HR people and other CEOs and other people talk about sort of the entitlement of the younger generation versus the need for empowerment of older generations. I don't see it that way. I see that the empowerment needs to be synthesized differently. So they want to be empowered. They don't necessarily feel entitled. That being said, the level of flexibility that they need is different from the generations that preceded them. The other thing that I find very interesting about this sort of up and coming younger generation, and David, I'm sure it's very similar with you. I started my first company when I was 16. I incorporated Sterling Cellular when I was 21. So I was the youngest guy in the room for many, many years. There is almost no day in Zeta's organizational meetings where I am not the oldest guy in the room by like a lot. You know, we're a big data analytics and AI company, right? That is not traditional for people. I just turned 51. So it's, you know, I still think of myself as young, but at the end of the day, our average employee is in their late 20s. The thing that's really interesting, and I think a lot of it comes down to sort of this sort of what I call the FOMO that's been created by Instagram, right? So like we all know that this sort of next generation looks at everybody else's Instagram and sort of says, well, shit, why are they, why are they, all right, sorry. Well, why are they on the beach and I'm not? Like it's called fear of being, you know, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
It's really similar in this generation's careers. They see one person who made VP, therefore, where's my title? Like, why am I not there? And the ability, or I'm sorry, the time which with they want to move up has contracted so dramatically from sort of our generation of employees, where most people I knew, I was an entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur for the same reason almost all of us did. I didn't have a job coming out of school. It was 1990. It was sort of the 3 great recessions ago. Nobody was hiring. So my opportunity cost to start a business was 0, right? But the people I worked with who got jobs, they would work for 5 to 7 years before becoming a manager, or then a director. And then 10 years in, if they got VP, it was like amazing. This younger generation wants to consolidate that and be a VP in 3 years, so it's just different. And by the way, what we find is with some people, if you give them the opportunity to move up that quickly, they really excel. Others, they fail quickly. And my whole theory in business is fail fast if you're going to fail.
Yep.
And if you're going to win fast, right? So by accelerating upward mobility for younger people, we've held on to them longer, the ones we want, and the ones that don't make it, once you move them up, you sort of move them out. And it becomes the next guy's problem.
Yeah, fire fast became one of my philosophies that I didn't like as things evolved. Time is always interesting because I see that changing generationally as well. Obviously, time is relative, a man-made construct. I study time to this day. I'm 1 year older than you, even though I look a decade older. But literally, I love to explore perspectives of time from successful people that especially tell you, I'm the first one to wake up and the last one to go to bed. Like me, I'm a 16-hour productivity person a week, because I think an activity you get paid for, an activity you don't. Let me really understand your perspective of time.
So you're really opening a can of worms with me, as I've given massive talks on how time does not exist, right? So time is simply a tool that was created by man, because we can't say, meet me at, you have to say 2 o'clock, right? So it effectively made our lives measurable. And if you didn't have that, then we wouldn't be able to organize as a society, and we certainly wouldn't be able to interact and sort of excel as a race and a society as we have. So, bottom line is that, to me, the ability to use time to your advantage as an entrepreneur, it's very moldable. And, I don't sleep a lot. One of the funniest conversations of my life was with Adriana Huffington, who's very big on sleep. We were at a friend's house, mutual friend, also out on the end of Long Island, and we just started talking. And she's so amazing that you're just listening to her. And so she was very big on her sleep. So she's like, "How much do you sleep a night?" And I said, "Well, I usually sleep between 5 and 6 hours, and I've done that since I was very young." And she's like, no. You're doing that because you think you're supposed to do that as a CEO. And she goes into this whole thing. She says, "Okay, how often do you wake up tired?" I said, "Never." She said, "How often does your alarm wake you up in the morning?" I'm like, "Never." Like, when was the last time you had a stress-filled episode where you felt like really, college, cramming for exams? That was a while ago. And she went through all the questions, and sort of at the end, she was like, "All right, you're in the 5 to 7% that don't need sleep. The other 97 do." Or another 93.
I had a Propellify there in New Jersey with her. I had the almost identical conversation because I go to bed at 11, wake up at 4 almost every day. And since law school, I haven't had any of those issues as well. So not only do we have so much in common there, but we fall into that respect. And I love that you're the only other person I know that really understands that time is a man-made construct, but it's needed. But we can bend it because of that. If you understand it, you can bend it and accelerate it and expand it and not quit. I think when you understand time, the biggest benefit in the construct of what you're imagining is that people that understand time like we do, there's no reason to quit, right? Because you're able to have persistence with patience.
The only reason guys like you and I end up quitting is to not end up, with our families hating us. But at the end of the day, my hobby is my work. My work is my love. And as, I forget if it was Confucius or one of the Buddhas who said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Right. So, and I can't say I've loved every day. There's there's an adage I say as an entrepreneur, and it's sort of excellence. You talked about it, aptitude for risk, lower opportunity cost to sort of enter that. But ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to get kicked in the short ones every day. You're getting kicked at least once. You're going to at least once a day. And I'm telling you right now, it's the 3 and 4 kick days that I need, sort of a glass of wine at 5 or 6 instead of 7 or 8.
Right.
But, it's the people who can take that and continue to overcome. And, you're going to have a setback or a piece of bad news almost every day. And it's just, how do you contend with it and how do you deal with it? And a lot of that comes back to time, right? So if you're our age, I now understand from a long time of getting kicked that, okay, I got kicked. How do we fix it?
I was going to say, I'll give you a new nuance. I consider myself a ferocious Buddha, which is this combination, but I switched up that saying about loving what you do. I always say, if you can learn to love what sucks, then you'll never work a day in your life. Because
I don't think I've gotten there yet. I don't like it. I don't love the suckiness.
Yeah, but I think everyone has a certain amount of suck in their life, and the people that learn to love the suck or can find the light, the love, and the lessons. All right, real quick, just 2 insights for me. I would love to know, number one, your favorite book and why, and then your favorite quote and why, just to finish up.
So I'll start with number 2, never waste a crisis. It's been my favorite quote for a very long time. I've used it for many, many years, and it has never been more apt than today. A crisis is the single greatest opportunity to remake your life, your business, or anything you think could be made better, and then emerge stronger. Now, I used to say that was a Winston Churchill quote, although one of my guys corrected me after much research and told me it was Machiavelli.
Oh, really?
When he wrote The Prince. Yeah, I always quoted Churchill, but Churchill being Churchill took a great quote and made it better. But that's my absolute favorite quote. And I would have said it 6 months ago or today. Yeah. Like, it's still one of my favorite things. And then, I'm a little weird. I don't read a lot of business books. I'm reading a book right now called The Forgotten Man, which has sort of been being talked about as the de facto book of the Great Depression. So if you think of the time period we're in right now, I sort of quantify it as 1918 plus 1929 plus 1968 equals 2020.
Oh, wow.
If you take, sort of the flu pandemic of 1918, you take not just the crash and the drop of GDP of 29, but the massive disruption of our food supply. And people forget about what a big deal the Dust Bowl was. Certainly, the guy who wrote the Grapes, I should remember who wrote the Grapes of Wrath in this moment. But, I was going to make a
was he
Steinbeck. Yeah. Wow.
Steinberg was stuck. It's like Steinbeck. Yep.
We're entrepreneurs. We don't have to remember that. But then you had the race riots of 1968 that have all come together into where we are now. So if you look at it, I really enjoyed that book. But when people ask me what's my favorite book of all time, it is definitely the book, The Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Not a business book, no. but certainly, one of the most entertaining and certainly the best book I've ever read.
A great book. I used to walk by her house when I went to law school at Tulane because my mom made me go to law school. But what a great pieces of advice. I would tell you, my mom did, all the teasing that I give her. One of the advices that I give, she told me to study history, and I really avoided it, and I started doing it, and I was like, why should I study, Ben Franklin's autobiography, Mom? Why should I study this stuff? She said, because you're going to learn human nature, and human nature never changes. So these books, and for entrepreneurs, if you want one thing to know, it's human nature. And I know that you have that emotional intelligence that has allowed you to build these great companies, to endure what it takes to get hit in the short ones 4 or 5 times a day and still smile. And it's been an absolute pleasure learning parts of your playbook. We have David Steinberg, unbelievable entrepreneur, here with David Meltzer on Entrepreneurs, the Playbook.